What was this James Gunn Supergirl movie coming out on June 23rd, 2026? I thought it would be only apt to dive into a bit about the comic book inspiration for this movie, and it's not often when the secondary superhero gets the star focus. But then again, this does seem to be a common James Gunn pattern, taking lesser known characters and bringing them to the forefront. He did it with the Justice Gang being based off not the Justice League, but of the Justice Society, and of course, everything he did with the Guardians of the Galaxy and the Suicide Squad. Though while his previous films were more or less original stories, just using the comic book characters and elements to fit the mold of the story he wants to tell, Supergirl looks to have a much more clear reference point based upon the trailers we've seen so far. It makes sense though. Peacemaker wasn't even a joke of a character. He was just an extra body to be used in the background if you needed an extra body, before Gunn managed to get his hands on him. The Guardians teams in the Marvel movies were based off a team that was only formed back in the mid 2000s, with the original Guardians of the Galaxy team being a far cry from what the movie became. But Supergirl always had at least something. She was prevalent in many shows and movies, and for the past few decades has been popular enough to have her own personal comic runs. And of course the CW show, where it was super popular and shows a major moneymaker for the channel, you had a character who already had a decent amount of recognition to the greater public. So how do you make a story based off of her? Well, you do the same thing as you do for other characters who need an origin story. Use the comic book origin. Though that being said, that's easier said than done. You see, unlike a Spider-Man or a Batman where their beginning has already been established, the original Supergirl is a bit more of a complicated one. It doesn't help that there's already multiple characters that use the same name and look nearly identical. Reminds me of something. Anyways, let's go through all the Supergirls first and figure out which one Gunn is going to use. I mean, it's obviously going to be Kara Zor-El. I want to talk about other ones for a bit too. Besides, Guy Gardner was featured in the Superman movie, and he wasn't even the first or even second Green Lantern. Maybe he'll try a more unique version of origin of Supergirl. I mean, there's also Power Girl, and don't get me started on her. Somehow, despite appearing both later on and appearing in a lot less media, she somehow has an even more complicated backstory for her. It's still fun. Anyways, let's start off with Sir L. Starting off with Sir L, the most visually different one from the lot. She was originally meant to be from the future and the daughter of Superman and Lois, but then was revealed to be a person with a weird dual personality, one of them being Sir L and one of them being a human named Maya. She's still from the future and her power base is originally from Superman, but she's fully human, just with split personality and weird and strange hybrid genes. I don't need to talk about her much, however, as she became non-canon rather quickly and was erased from existence, only to be pseudo-brought back when DC brought back the multiverse, but she hasn't really appeared in anything yet. Next up is Matrix, not actually a Kryptonian. Created post-Crisis in the 1980s, she comes from an alternate universe where Lex Luthor is a good guy and made her to save the world. She was given some extra powers like shape-shifting and turning invisible, and she was just sort of Supergirl for the 90s until Linda Danvers. Created in 1996, they wanted a Supergirl, but they also wanted Superman to be forever alone as the last son of Krypton, who conveniently had the same name as Supergirl's alter ego's name. Convenient. This Linda was originally a bad person, doing crime before she was nearly sacrificed to a demonic cult by her boyfriend Buzz. Yeah, I don't know either. Thankfully, Matrix Supergirl saved her, and then they fused together into the new Supergirl. And for the next few years, Linda Danvers was Supergirl, with her design being the main influence for Supergirl appearances in shows and games. And also, she's an angel for some reason. That changes when they were split off, and it was only Linda that was Supergirl for a bit, before Linda finally finds Matrix in the Garden of Eden. Yes, the thing from the Bible. Don't ask questions. She then travels back in time into the DC pre-Crisis timeline and marries Superman and has a kid with him before leaving again. Again, don't ask questions. Then Peter Davids, the original creator for Linda Danvers, had his own comic series with a character that seemed a lot like Linda Danvers from the DC universe, sort of alluding to the fact that she was the precursor to the main character in his current series. But a few years later, back into actual DC canon, she does return, and she is then subsequently sent to Hell. Yeah, okay, so none of these make a decent origin for Supergirl that feel coherent for the James Gunn universe, so I guess we have to move on to original. And hey, maybe the original Kara Zor-El could give us a more coherent story. Well, even using that as a base, it doesn't get much easier. See, the idea of a female superpowered iteration of Superman has always been an idea for a long time. Lois Lane would don the moniker of Superwoman and Kryptonian powers back in 1943, and even donning a blonde wig in 1951. And whenever Lois gains any Kryptonian-like powers, she's dubbed Superwoman, which happens a lot more often than you would think, and maybe more often than it should, but hey, writer's block's a thing, I guess. Anyways, the first real mention of Supergirl was in Superboy number 5, when Superboy meets an actual queen who likes him and wore an S on her outfit. That's it, she doesn't do much else. The next Supergirl is actually Supergirl. It was a hyphen between super and girl, like Spider-Man. Created in 1958, Jimmy Olsen created her with magic, then she died, though she was really just a test dummy to see if fans would appreciate a Supergirl. And apparently they did, because in 1959, Kara Zor-El Supergirl was made. Now we had Supergirl, and her origin was that she was raised in a Kryptonian city, a fragment of Krypton that survived destruction and launched into space. But the city was however doomed by a meteor shower, and Kara was sent to Earth by her parents, to be raised by her cousin Kal-El, known as Superman. The more gory details for her origin were only explained decades later, as this was old school comics which tended to be more whimsical than anything. This was mostly done to explain how the comic writers could introduce a fully grown Kryptonian to the story without it being too confusing. Unless she was Supergirl, and she was a Supergirl in her 60s and 70s, so she had plenty of wacky adventures. But then the post-crisis came along and she died and was erased from canon. Thus she would remain in the pre-crisis timeline for the next number of years, after officially being brought back in 2004 with a brand new origin. Kara was born before Superman when she was a teenager and he was just a baby. It was a whole planet destruction thing. She was sent into a rocket in suspended animation to look after Kal-El when they both landed on Earth. However, her rocket is caught in an explosion and encased in a kryptonite, thus causing her to be stuck for years in suspended animation before finally arriving on Earth when Superman was already an adult. Then her origin was implied to be that she was meant to kill baby Clark, but in all actuality she was just suffering from kryptonite poisoning, and thus she was Supergirl for the next few years. Then comes around 2011 and New 52 and a new origin is thrusted onto her once more. It hits mostly the same beats as the 2004 version, but this time she is never truly able to get over the loss of her world. While Earth is all Superman knew, Supergirl once lived in a far more technologically advanced world with memories of loved ones and friends and family. Now, the New 52 run is easily one of her strongest runs out there, and one of the few things that the majority of readers could agree that was good and an improvement from previous iterations that came from the New 52. Unfortunately, that had to end when Rebirth kicked in, and Rebirth was made in 2016, and the CW shows were popular at that point, so some changes were made to his Supergirl, as she was made a bit younger, she went to school, and she was introduced to a lot of characters and settings that were based upon the show itself. This, however, didn't last long, as in 2021, Infinite Frontier relaunched her again, and here we see the influence of the Supergirl movie. Finally. Now, the James Gunn movie is mostly based upon the 8-issue series Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, as can be seen when all the actors are holding the comics for promo bits. And in the 8-issue series, and both the comic and the movie show very similar backstory and hook as the New 52 version of Supergirl, where a girl lives in a reality that she has godlike powers and being younger than her cousins despite being born first, and everyone, everything, and everywhere she knows is dead, but with some more added details. Now I'm going into detail to cover the stuff the trailer seems to have in relation to the comic. This is going to be mostly a quick offhand review. I do think the comic's pretty good. A lot of people say it's the definitive Supergirl comic run, and I can see it, though I don't quite agree with that opinion. It's definitely good though. If you like the movie True Grit, read it. Art is great and the story is pretty well written, though personally I do think there are flaws with it, like the villain's cartoonishly evil development over the number of months that occur inside the story, and some things are a bit too convenient and only seem to be written in order to pad out time. Looking at you, issue 5. There are also quite a few moments that are made purely for shock value, but at the same time, it is pretty good shock value. And they show plenty of instances of why Supergirl is indeed a super and why she should hold the Supergirl moniker. There is a lot of narration in this comic, and while I do enjoy it, some might find it wordy and a bit of a chore to read through, but I find all the visual gags and jokes all work pretty well for me. Now, why don't we compare the comics to see what will happen inside the movie? Spoilers, obviously. Let's start off with what causes everything to happen. Origins seem similar enough with a few minor changes. Supergirl is on a planet with a red sun. Comics, it was to celebrate her 21st birthday, while in the movie it seems like she was just trying to have a good time. In the comics, however, the world that she's drinking seems to still be stuck in the Iron Age, and everything that is related to Kara is extremely foreign, like how people don't understand what a spaceship is. Our other character, Ryufe, I'm gonna pick one of those pronunciations and probably interchange them whenever. Sorry about that. Anyways, there's our main character Ryu. In the comics, is on the hunt for her father's killer Krem. And she's even armed with a sword that Krem used to kill her father with. We can see from the trailer that this is consistent to the comics. Though in the comics, only Ryu's father was killed, while her 6 brothers and mother were all fine. In the trailer, it's explicitly stated that her entire family and home got burned down. Now, in the comics, there's a warrior, I believe named Bounty, who is hired by Ryu to kill Krem. Only he doesn't and takes her sword from her, which causes Supergirl to intervene and take down Bounty, while she was still drunk. Ryu then tries to convince Supergirl to kill Krem, which Supergirl obviously says no to. While in the comics, as Supergirl is trying to tell Ryu that revenge isn't worth it, Krem attacks them while being led there by Bounty, who wants petty revenge. Both she and Crypto are shot by the arrows, but thanks to Supergirl still having some yellow sun in her blood, she commands to beat up Bounty, and Krem, in fear, runs into Supergirl's ship just as it auto-launches into space. A bit convenient? Most definitely. Now, the arrows were tipped with poison that was lethal to animals, and the only way to get the perfect antidote to cure Crypto was to find the original source of the poison. Something that seems to be similarly implied by the trailer. The one major difference is that the journey in the comics takes several months for them to track down Krem and finally get the antidote, while, as stated in the trailer, 3 days. Of course, the movie also has Lobo as well. The comics were not that kind of story, so obviously, no Lobo. In the comics, Krem, despite living a medieval life his entire life, finds himself part of a gang of killers called the Brigands, who hurt for fun, and the amount of atrocities that he and the gang proceed to do in the next few months is laughably comical in scale, as in several planetary massive genocides that no one is able to stop at all. Like I said, shock value to an excessive amount. Though again, from a result of this, there are good character moments for Supergirl to both show off her kindness and why she's a hero, and why she's also different from her own cousin. But the wake of damage that the Brigands leave is so massive, you'd think someone would have stopped them or at least tried to stop them by now. Like, there are space cops out there, as in the Lantern Corps, or at least the Demancey. Yeah, I didn't know they were a thing either until I looked them up. Or maybe they would have had some sort of run-in with his dark side, considering that he's sort of a planet conqueror. But again, no, this is a standalone story, and my god, does it feel really standalone at times. Still, this overarching villain is a bit of an eye roll if you think too hard about how one man who didn't even know what a steam engine is now somehow mastering powerful reality warping magic and complete understanding of space travel, and somehow knows exactly how to deal with a Kryptonian. Everyone in space somehow knew who Kryptonians were and who both Superman and Supergirl are, despite the fact that the planet blew up decades ago, and it wasn't known for a lot of space travel, because if it was, there'd be a lot more Kryptonians hanging around. And again, this is relatively early on, and this would be only a relatively new Supergirl, so Clark would have only been doing his hero stuff as Superman for like 10-ish years. So how do they know about all of this? Did Lois Lane's Daily Planet newspaper's get into their space mailboxes somehow? Who knows? I mean, at this point, Superman probably would have done some space stuff, but really? Enough for people in another galaxy to know of you? What the hell did this man do? There's not even a single mention of a Lantern at this point, though considering Supergirl and Green Lantern's history, maybe that's for the best. Though this is only a minor nitpick really, and it does at least big up Supergirl. However, Krem still makes no sense in the comics, so it's good to see that Krem inside the movie trailer at least is shown to be an already established space pirate terrorist and already a member of the Brigands, and they don't seem to be as comically evil, over-the-top space genociders that wiped out entire planets where no one could stop them. They seem a bit smaller scale, which makes sense as to why they can get away with stuff like this. Also, now that I'm thinking about it, realized that they never actually explained in the comics how Supergirl managed to escape the Iron Age planet, despite losing her ship. I mean, we see her board another ship, but we're not told where and how she was able to get onto this ship, because the rest of the planet was definitely isolated from the spacefaring world, and the comics never truly explain it, as I don't think the writer really knew how to explain it properly without it being confusing. Anyways, throughout the comics, we go through a lot of interactions between Kara and Ryuf. Ryuf is only 14, and she's now learning more about the universe, more about Supergirl, and growing up and learning from Supergirl. That's it by the authors themselves, sort of a master-apprentice situation happening, and Ryuf slowly sees Kara for who she is, Supergirl, a superhero. Eventually, the comic run ends up with them catching Krem with the help of Supergirl's boyfriend horse Comet. Don't ask. Also Supergirl and her boyfriend horse take out the Brigade, though all of that was more secondary, as the main focus was Krem and Ryuf dueling before Ryu beats him and decides to spare him and let him repent for his sins by being jailed in a Phantom Zone for the next 300 years. Of course, none of this happens before Krim makes a grand speech about how he was fair and just with his actions of gleefully and happily burning, cutting, and torturing and killing entire families in space. Again, weakest part of the story was everything that had to do when they tried to address the villain directly, though, to be fair, the comic was more about the journey than the final destination. I have no doubt that the movie will be similar to the plot with the addition of Lobo and of course 3 days instead of untold months, but I wouldn't be surprised if it ends with a duel between Ryuth and Krem. And of course, as we see in the trailer, Supergirl destroys the Brigands. Spoilers, I guess. But plot similarities to the main story aside, another major similarity between the two is again Supergirl's origin. As stated in the New 52, she's a person who lived a life that's now long gone and is struggling to find her new home. And the trailer does show a sneak peek of how similar the origin story is between the two. In the comic, Supergirl is taking math class on Krypton when the planet begins to explode. Everyone else in her class perishes, but she manages to survive. Crawling out of the rubble, she can only sit by a ledge and watch the destruction of her city. However, before the planet fully exploded, Kara's father was able to section off her city and launch it into space. Unfortunately, the launch killed several, but those who survived could at least live on this floating planet. However, soon after, Kara then had witnessed her mother die in her hand, as it's revealed that some of the starlight from space was hitting an asteroid, which were yellow sun energy. Good, as they activated their Kryptonian powers. Unfortunately, the stuff also activates kryptonite to be radioactive, which is what the rock is comprised of. Not so good. So, everyone remaining had to quickly cover the ground with lead shielding to stop the radiation from poisoning everyone. Tara was sent to work harder and longer than everyone, and eventually the lead shielding was complete, and of the 18,000 who lived in the city, only 5,000 remained. Now she had a year to help deal with the dead and try and survive. While the city could survive in space, it could not be steered, and eventually it hit an asteroid field, where a meteor storm hit. Hail of rocks destroyed the lead shielding, meaning that the kryptonite poisoning would return. There was nothing left to do. Kara's father did the only thing he could think of and tried to save his daughter. As for Kara, would be the only one who would be able to see tomorrow at just the age of 14, the same age that Ryuth was when she lost her father. Kara lost her world. It was there was a chance to carry the world and the memory of this life on her shoulders, carry the weight of a dead planet with her as she trudged on, continuing forward. For she was Supergirl, the woman of tomorrow. And the trailer shows that her life in the DC Cinematic Universe wasn't going to be any better, which means that the movie has a potential to be very good. And with the introduction of Lobo and the action scenes that we do get to see, it's going to be a lot more action-packed than a comic book counterpart, and probably going to be a lot more linear and straightforward. Because, I'll be honest, the issue 5 where she's stuck on a planet was a sun emitting Kryptonian radiation, her just sort of shrugging it off once night falls, kinda added a lot more wrinkles than I think the author intended for her origin story, where the Kryptonian radiation was just so deadly. Back on topic about the movie, I'm sure we'll see a showdown between Ryuth and Krem, and who knows, maybe Ryuth becomes a recurring character in the James Gunn verse. That'd be fun. And man, I have to say this again, and I just want to say again, I really don't like the Kryptonite Sun issue. Art was very good, but the story was kind of was how they solved the problem. But hey, pick up the comic, they're quick enough reads and have some great artwork to appreciate it if nothing else, and it can help you prepare for the Supergirl movie. And you can prepare for get ready for your heartstrings to be tugged, and I look forward to watching the movie. Just please don't do a Peacemaker Season 2 finale on me again, James Gunn, please. Now that I'm done talking about the Supergirl James Gunn movie that's coming out, there is another Supergirl movie that we should probably pay tribute, considering it is our predecessor, and the one that walked so that this James Gunn movie could walk. No, I'm not talking about the CW. I'm not watching 6 seasons of Supergirl, and definitely not the expanded CW verse. The greatest live-action Supergirl movie out there. Well, really, the only Supergirl live-action movie currently out there. But hey, gold medal still gold medal, and #1 spot still the #1 spot. Soon, I will be talking about the greatest live-action Supergirl movie that's currently available to the greater public. And until then, like, comment, subscribe to catch the sequel to this video. And until then, this is Captain Bill signing off.